Remember that space hero who fought Ming the Merciless with a blonde crew cut and impossibly tight pants?
Be catastrophic. Earthquakes, tidal waves.
Exactly. It will disrupt your world, destroy any resistance.
Flash Gordon wasn't just a sci-fi reboot. It was Filmation's desperate attempt to compete with Star Wars, using recycled 1930s characters and animation so cheap it made Saturday morning look expensive.
I think you've done it.
Today, we're counting down 20 wild facts about the space adventurer who proved nostalgia alone can't save terrible production values. 20. It was created to cash in on Star Wars. Filmation Studios greenlit The New Adventures of Flash Gordon, explicitly to capitalize on Star Wars' 1977 box office phenomenon. George Lucas had proven audiences craved space opera adventures.
Serial on television called Adventure Theater, and they had Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe on it, and I used to love that. So I went off and wrote my own space opera.
And studios scrambled to exploit that appetite with any available science fiction property. Flash Gordon's 1930s comic strip origins provided instant name recognition without expensive original character development. NBC commissioned the series hoping to capture Star Wars family audience through familiar characters in space adventure settings. 19. The theme song was composed by a disco producer. The show's opening theme was composed by Michael Kamen.
Desperate mission to save Earth from the evil plottings of the tyrannical space lord Ming.
A disco and rock producer who had never scored animation before. His synthesizer-heavy theme attempted to sound futuristic and contemporary, mimicking Star Wars orchestral grandeur on a fraction of the budget. The result was a bizarre disco-funk arrangement that sounded nothing like epic space opera and dated immediately. The theme was so universally mocked that Filmation replaced it mid-season with a more traditional orchestral arrangement. 18. Flash Gordon's voice actor hated the character. Robert Ridgely voiced Flash Gordon while simultaneously playing villains.
I don't understand what's wrong with Baron.
I do. He's jealous of you.
That's crazy.
And tough guy characters in other productions. He found Flash's Boy Scout heroism boring and one-dimensional, calling the character an impossible goody-goody with no personality beyond being brave and handsome. Ridgely privately told other voice actors he took the job purely for steady paychecks. His frustration occasionally showed in performances. Some line deliveries sound noticeably flat or disinterested.
Till now, I don't intend to leave Dale and Zarkov or myself to the whims of Ming's mercy.
17. The animation was rotoscoped from live action footage. Filmation used rotoscoping extensively, tracing over live action filmed footage to create animated movement. This technique created realistic human movement, but looked stiff and unnatural, lacking animation's exaggerated expressiveness. Actors performed scenes in costume, which were filmed and then traced frame by animators. The process was cheaper than traditional animation, but produced uncanny results. Characters moved like real humans, but felt lifeless and mechanical. Modern audiences find rotoscoped animation deeply unsettling. 16. Ming the Merciless had 3 different voice actors. Ming the Merciless was voiced by 3 different actors across the show's run.
Last man to stand will be made a king and given any woman on Mongo for his bride.
Without explanation for the constantly changing voice. Alan Oppenheimer performed Ming initially.
I know who you are.
Then you must also know.
Then Michael Bell took over mid-first season.
This time, Flash Gordon, you shall not escape.
And finally, Lou Scheimer voiced him in scattered episodes. This inconsistency resulted from scheduling conflicts and budget limitations. Filmation hired whoever was available rather than maintaining vocal consistency. The constantly changing voice undermined Ming's menacing presence and confused viewers. 15. Dale Arden was completely useless in every episode. Dale Arden, Flash's companion, served no narrative function beyond being rescued repeatedly and expressing concern.
We'll come back for your friend, Earthman.
She possessed no special skills, contributed nothing to problem solving, and existed purely as damsel in distress motivation for Flash's heroics. Even by 1979 standards, the characterization was offensively regressive. Contemporary shows featured competent female characters, but Dale remained trapped in 1930s gender stereotypes. Voice actress Melindy Britt later criticized the writing, saying she begged writers to give Dale something useful to do. 14. Dr. Zarkov's design changed constantly. Dr. Zarkov's appearance varied wildly between episodes.
My previous calculations indicated impact in a little over a week, but now...
His hair color, facial features, and body proportions changed depending on which animation studio worked on that episode. Filmation outsourced animation to multiple international studios without providing consistent character model sheets, creating bizarre, visual inconsistencies. Some episodes showed Zarkov as elderly with white hair, others as middle-aged with brown hair, and occasionally as nearly bald. These design inconsistencies were so extreme that casual viewers sometimes thought he was a different character. 13. The show reused stock footage. Excessively. Approximately 40% of every episode consisted of recycled stock footage from previous episodes, an extraordinarily high percentage even by limited animation standards. Spaceship launches, battle sequences, and character reactions were reused constantly, sometimes multiple times within single episodes. Viewers noticed identical scenes appearing repeatedly, destroying narrative immersion and making the show feel cheap and repetitive. One memorable spaceship explosion sequence appeared in 17 different episodes across 2 seasons. Filmation's stock footage library became infamous in the animation industry. 12. NBC scheduled it against Super Friends and lost badly. NBC scheduled The New Adventures of Flash Gordon directly against ABC's Super Friends.
Presented it to NBC only because when I went over to NBC, who had bought for Saturday morning,
which dominated Saturday morning ratings with established DC Comics superheroes. This competitive scheduling was strategic suicide. Flash Gordon averaged only 12% audience share compared to Super Friends' 35% share. Children overwhelmingly preferred Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman over a relatively obscure 1930s space hero their parents might remember, but they didn't. The ratings disadvantage made the show financially unsustainable. 11. The writers had never read Flash Gordon comics. Most staff writers were completely unfamiliar with Flash Gordon's comic strip history and worked purely from brief character descriptions provided by producers.
A writer named Sam Peoples. Sam had done the second pilot for Star Trek. It's the pilot that sold.
This resulted in storylines and characterizations that contradicted established Flash Gordon mythology, frustrating the small but vocal fan base who knew the source material. Writers treated the show as a generic space adventure without understanding what made Flash Gordon distinctive. One writer later admitted he thought Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers were the same character until halfway through the first season. 10. Filmation prohibited physical violence in fight scenes. Company policy strictly prohibited characters punching, kicking, or causing visible injury during combat, a restriction that made action scenes absurdly bloodless. Fight sequences showed characters grappling awkwardly, pushing each other, or using laser weapons that merely stunned opponents. The restriction resulted from parental advocacy groups pressuring studios about violence in children's programming. However, it made Flash Gordon's battles against Ming's forces feel comically safe. Villains fell down dramatically when touched gently. Modern viewers find these neutered fight scenes unintentionally hilarious. 9. The show featured a racist Lion Man stereotype. Prince Thune, the Lion Man ally from Planet Mongo, was portrayed using offensive African tribal stereotypes, speaking in broken English, wearing primitive clothing, and characterized as simple-minded, despite supposedly being royalty. The problematic characterization attracted immediate criticism from civil rights organizations who called it blatantly racist and inappropriate for children's programming. NBC received complaint letters demanding the character be removed or completely reimagined. Filmation responded by reducing Prince Thune's appearances dramatically in later episodes rather than fixing the offensive characterization. 8. The spaceship designs were stolen from other shows. The Defiant, Flash's primary spacecraft, was nearly identical to ships from previous Filmation productions, with only slight color changes and minor surface detail modifications. Production designers routinely recycle designs across different shows to save concept art development costs. Eagle-eyed viewers noticed Flash Gordon's ships looked suspiciously similar to vessels from Space Academy and Star Trek animated series. This design recycling extended to weapons, costumes, and technology, creating an unintentional shared universe where completely different shows appeared to exist in the same visual world. 7. Voice actors recorded episodes in 2-hour marathon sessions. To minimize studio rental costs, Filmation crammed entire episode voice recordings into 2-hour marathon sessions with minimal breaks. Voice actors performed multiple characters consecutively at breakneck pace, sometimes recording 3 complete episodes in a single afternoon, producing noticeably flat, emotionless performances. 6. The show was canceled mid-season. Without warning, NBC canceled the show in December 1981 without completing the planned second season. Filmation learned about cancellation from trade publications rather than network notification. The final episode aired ending on an unresolved cliffhanger. Cast members discovered unemployment when their agents stopped receiving booking calls. 5. Lou Scheimer voiced multiple characters. In every episode, Filmation founder Lou Scheimer performed numerous supporting and background voices throughout the series under pseudonyms to avoid paying additional voice actors, sometimes playing 5 or 6 characters per episode. This extreme cost-cutting meant entire scenes featured Scheimer talking to himself using slightly different inflections. 4. The show's educational segments were legally required. FCC regulations mandated children's programming include educational content, so episodes concluded with brief flash facts segments explaining basic science concepts. These segments had nothing to do with the episode's story and felt awkwardly tacked on, but allowed Filmation to qualify for government tax incentives. 3. Filmation went bankrupt. Partially because of this show, The New Adventures of Flash Gordon was among Filmation's final productions before the studio filed bankruptcy in 1989. The show's poor ratings, low merchandise sales, and minimal syndication value contributed to the studio's financial collapse, demonstrating that 1930s characters couldn't compete with contemporary franchises without creative reinvention. 2. It competed against a live-action Flash. Gordon movie Universal Pictures released a live-action Flash Gordon theatrical film in December 1980, creating bizarre market competition. The camp, colorful theatrical film featuring Queen's rock soundtrack attracted vastly more attention than Filmation's serious animated version, confusing brand identity and dividing potential audiences. 1. It proved nostalgia. Properties need creative reinvention. The show demonstrated that simply adapting recognizable characters wasn't sufficient. Nostalgia properties required fundamental creative reinvention for contemporary audiences. The show's faithful adherence to 1930s characterizations felt dated and irrelevant to 1979 children, teaching studios that nostalgia required creative transformation, not simple replication. So there you have it. 20 wild facts proving The New Adventures of Flash Gordon wasn't just a failed reboot, it was a cautionary tale about cheap production, creative bankruptcy, and the delusion that nostalgia alone could compete with Star Wars without actual quality or investment. The wildest part? A show created specifically to capitalize on space opera mania instead demonstrated everything not to do when adapting classic characters for contemporary audiences. Now, blast off to your next video. And remember, sometimes the greatest adventures are the ones that teach us valuable lessons about failure, even if nobody wanted to watch them in the first place.